To die of hunger or die trying to get food? Humanitarian groups say Gazans now face an unimaginable choice. Over consecutive days, civilians have been killed waiting for food aid. The senseless deaths are adding to already mounting pressure on Israel. There's a distinct change in some of the language we're hearing, even from Tel Aviv's staunchest allies. Is this a turning of the tide? Stay with us here on Counterpoints with me, Melinda Nusafora. This is how the UN has described the new aid delivery regime in Gaza.
Palestinians have been presented the grimmest of choices: die from starvation or risk being killed while trying to access the meagre food that is being made available through Israel's militarised humanitarian assistance mechanism.
Israel, with the backing of the US, is delivering aid through a private company, bypassing traditional humanitarian groups. For days, Gazans have reported being shot at as they scramble to access the limited supplies. Israel denies firing at civilians. It's the latest escalation in a seemingly endless humanitarian crisis, and it could be just the last straw for some of Israel's supporters. Former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, who we'll hear from shortly, now believes Israel is committing war crimes. And listen to this from Matthew Miller, the former State Department spokesperson during the Biden administration.
I think it is without a doubt true that Israel has committed war crimes.
You wouldn't have said that at the podium.
Yeah, look, because when you're at the podium, you're not expressing your personal opinion. You're expressing the conclusions of the United States government. The United States government had not concluded they've committed war crimes, still have not concluded that.
But your personal view is they have.
And
they were while you were there.
But yes.
The rhetoric is certainly starting to change. Coming up on Counterpoints, we'll ask if Israel is weaponising food and if that was always the part of its war plan. Is Israel guilty of committing war crimes? And if we can expect more pressure from Israel's allies. We'll kick off this episode of Counterpoints with a special interview. Ehud Olmert served as the Israeli Prime Minister between 2006 and 2009. For a time, he was part of the Likud party, the same political party as current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But in a bold departure from his successor, he slammed the ongoing war in Gaza, even describing the current Israeli government as the enemy within. It's not normal for former Israeli prime ministers to speak out in this kind of manner, but perhaps these aren't exactly normal times. Joining me now, and I thank him for his time, Mr. Olmert, thanks for joining us here on Counterpoints. I want to start by getting your assessment on the current situation we've been seeing at food distribution points across Gaza. News that over the past 3 days, almost 70 people have been killed. As the former leader of your country, what's your assessment of that?
Well, I think it's been said time and again, and I said it also, that at this stage, the war should end immediately. I don't think that there is any major objective which deserves the expansion of the military operation and the cost of the military operation, the cost for Israeli soldiers, the possible loss of hostages, and the loss of lives of Palestinians, non-involved Palestinians. The war from the very beginning, on the 8th of October, was absolutely justified. And I, amongst all of the Israelis, was completely in favor of trying to reach out and destroy the military capacity of Hamas because of what they have perpetrated against thousands of Israeli innocent people in their homes, in the living rooms, in the bedrooms, in the safe rooms, in the most brutal manner, butchering, beheading, raping children, mothers, elderly people. Terrible. And now it's after 20 months of fighting. And I think that we have achieved as much as can be achieved in a military operation against a terrorist organization. At the present time, the majority of Israelis, not just me, but a majority of Israelis, I'm just a voice for many of them, because you wouldn't pick up someone in the street and interview him, but you do with me for obvious reasons. But the majority of Israelis think that this war is unnecessary, is not going to achieve the release of the hostages, and it just causes terrible problems for us, losing soldiers, possibly losing the hostages, and also killing non-involved people amongst the Palestinians. And this is to end now.
When you, in the opinion piece you wrote for the Israeli press, Haaretz, when you wrote that you now believe that Israel is committing war crimes, what is it that, what event, what was it that you witnessed that was the turning point for you? What changed your opinion?
Well, first of all, it must be clear, and I didn't write any other way, that there is not a policy, not by the government, certainly not by the army, of indiscriminately killing people just because of the fun of killing people. But what disturbs me a great deal, and to many Israelis, is that there is a universal agreement in Israel that the war is not needed. Some go as far as saying, which I don't disagree, that the reason that the Prime Minister doesn't stop the war is because of personal political interest of the Prime Minister and not the real national security interest of the State of Israel. Under such circumstances, the loss of lives from all sides, from our side, possibly the hostages and non-involved Palestinians, is a crime, is something that can't be prolonged and has to stop right away. Also, which is a major source of my concern, I have to say, is the acts of violence perpetrated by the Hilltop youth in the West Bank against innocent Palestinians, burning their houses, their properties, the olive groves in such a brutal manner without an appropriate reaction by the Israeli police and the Israeli army is not something that can be tolerated and is not something that can be forgiven.
So can I extrapolate from that? Your concerns aren't just what's happening in Gaza. Is your concern, has it been what has allowed to become accepted as normal behaviour? Again,
I have to emphasize, I really don't know, and I don't think, and I therefore never say, that there has been any direct policy by the government or any order by the high command of the Israeli army to shoot indiscriminately, to bomb indiscriminately and kill regardless of what may be the possible, who may be the possible victims of this. No. But when it is widely accepted that the war is not necessary, when so many Israelis, commentators, observers, former generals, commanders of the IDF and the Mossad and the Secret Service say that the war should end now, and expanding the war and continuing the military operations cost the lives of so many people unnecessarily, this is something that can't be tolerated. It has to be criticized, and I am prepared to speak up for all those that feel that way and believe that it needs to be criticized and stopped.
When there are accusations of war crimes, it's a serious accusation and it implies that there is a guilty party. So where do you think the guilt should lie? Is this the government as a whole? Is it Mr. Netanyahu for leading this government? Is it the IDF? Where do you think the guilt is here?
Look, first of all, I have to say, I'm not an investigator, and I'm not in the process of inquiring on a daily basis, every hour, what happens in any particular section of Gaza and the military operations. What I say is, on a broad basis, the very fact that the war continues and there are so many unnecessary victims is something that can't be tolerated and has to stop. And the one person that is personally, directly, individually responsible for it is the one that carries the government with him and forces these decisions on the government and the army, and this is the Prime Minister.
Do you believe this goes as far as genocide?
No, I don't think, I never said so, I don't think so. But look, you don't have to push things, into the very extreme and draw comparisons between what happened in history to the Jewish people, which was entirely different ideologically and practically in terms of the outcome, in terms of the massive operations and whatnot, in order to criticize what happens today. What happens today is something that needs to stop right away, and that the number of victims is far beyond what can be tolerated and accepted. And that's what I'm saying.
Another former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, has called for a civil insurrection to topple the Israeli government. And the Prime Minister himself, Netanyahu, he's called for non-violent protests to shut down the government. Do you share those sentiments?
Yes.
You think the government needs to go?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. I know.
How? I mean, there's been so many elections and it doesn't seem to...
In what I subscribe to what Prime Minister Barak said. There should be a civil insurrection within the framework of democracy, civil disobedience, rioting in the streets, demonstrating in the streets, not cooperating with the government, because the government lost the trust of the people. It's true that the majority in parliament today is still held by the government for obvious reasons. The elections took place 2.5 years ago, long before any of the events which took place since the 7th of October actually presented an entirely different reality. But for the last year and more, every single poll drawn in Israel shows that over 60% of the people don't trust the government. Not only that they don't trust, but they think that Prime Minister Netanyahu prefers his personal political and interest and legal interest over the national interest of the State of Israel. So, and considering the cost of what happened to the State of Israel, to the economy of Israel, to the lives of thousands of Israelis, soldiers and citizens and civilians, and also to the reputation of the State of Israel across the world. Israel has been widely popular for good reasons. Israel is a fantastic country with great achievements, which won the admiration for good reasons of the international community. And now there is a feeling that Israel is becoming slowly but gradually into a pariah by the international community. And this is all the outcome of calculations which have nothing to do with the real interest of the State of Israel. This is precisely where extraordinary measures must be taken. And this is what I believe Prime Minister Barak didn't ask my permission or my approval. But what he says reflects the attitude of many, many Israelis because of what I've described now.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that Israel's ongoing operation is putting the hostages' lives at greater risk because of this prolonged bombing campaign?
Yes, that's precisely what I say. There is a serious, serious danger there is a chaos and anarchy which is spreading rapidly in Gaza, we will lose the hostages.
Do you think that the Prime Minister is showing a careless disregard for their lives?
This is an inevitable understanding of what is actually taking place.
Just finally, so do you think other Western leaders, Israel's allies, should be doing more to hold the Netanyahu government to account?
Well, I think they hold the government of Netanyahu to account in a very explicit and forceful manner. And I have to say, I had those, there are many leaders that speak against the government, against Israel, criticizing us, who are traditionally and consistently were against us no matter what we do. I don't take this as an example. But when I hear President Macron, and I hear Prime Minister Sturmer, and I hear Prime Minister Carney, and I hear Prime Minister Meloni, and I hear Chancellor Merz and others who are dedicated friends of the State of Israel, have been for generations. I mean, their countries, them, the political system, all were friends of the State of Israel. When they spell it out in such a manner, you can't ignore it and just say, they are all haters of Israel, they are anti-Semites. This is nonsense. They care for the damage that is caused to Israel and the damage that is caused by Israel. And therefore, we have to listen to them very carefully and respect their judgment, not on the basis of an almost spontaneous rejection because they are against us, but listening to what they say, to the sensitivity and the subtlety and the seriousness of their warnings, and maybe to comply with it.
Actually, let's end on a look to the future. Do you have a hope that there will one day be a peaceful resolution, a two-state solution, a time when there will be peace between Israelis and Palestinians in the region?
This has been my life mission, and this still is the most important thing for the future of the State of Israel. At the end of the day, a reasonable person has to ask himself, okay, let's assume that we will be eliminating every single Hamas fighter that holds a gun or an RPG or a hand grenade, and we'll kill all of them. None will remain. There still will be 6 million Palestinians in the Gaza and in the West Bank. What are we going to do with them? What is the alternative? How can we make sure that in the future we'll not have to face what we have been facing and dealing with in the past? There can be only one way, which is a comprehensive peace agreement on the basis of two states. This is what I proposed to the Palestinian president in 2008, and this is what I have again promoted together with my Palestinian partner, the former foreign minister and the UN ambassador of the Palestinian Authority, Nasser al-Qudba, who together with me published a joint statement that tried to advance the beginning of negotiations for a two-state solution on the basis of what I proposed to the Palestinians, unfortunately, when they declined to accept it in 2008. But in no time is too late to adopt it now and to move forward in order to, once and for all, conclude the violence and the hatred and the wars in the Middle East for a future of hope.
We thank you so much for your insightful comments and your candour here on Counterpoints. Mr. Olmert, we thank you for making the time. Ehud Olmert, former Israeli Prime Minister.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get into our debate to discuss the latest developments in Gaza and the changing international rhetoric we've been hearing of late. I'm joined by Yaakov Amidror, a former Israeli National Security Advisor and former Major General in the IDF, and Norman Finkelstein, an American political scientist and author, best known for his forensic critiques of Israeli policy. gentlemen. Welcome to Counterpoints, and thank you both for your time. Well, we're almost 21 months now into this war in Gaza, and despite intense diplomatic efforts, there still remains no end in sight. After an 11-week blockade, Israel has agreed to resume the distribution of food aid. But there are reports that Israeli tanks, helicopters and soldiers have opened fire on people at or close to these aid points. The UN is calling for an investigation and has suggested it may constitute a war crime. Yaakov, let me start with you. What do you make of this latest war crime accusation, and how would you assess what's been happening at those food distribution points?
Like many stories about Gaza, all of that are lies. We didn't open fire not with tanks, not with helicopters. There was some incident in which we had to stop the mob going on and threatening the Americans and the Israelis, which are around the area from which the Palestinians can take the food. But no tank was there and no helicopter was there. And we don't know if anyone was hurt. In the previous story, we could find that Hamas was the one which killed his own people and then blamed Israel. I don't know yet because we don't have enough time to understand well what was going there, but we know that no tank and no helicopter was part of the fire from the Israeli point, from the Israeli side, and how many was done by Hamas and how many was done by us to prevent them to take the place with the Americans inside, that we don't know yet.
Norman, what's your assessment? There has been the line from the Israeli authorities that it was Hamas that were firing directly onto Palestinians. What's your read of it?
We have pictures. It's not just claim. We have pictures of Hamas doing it.
Norman, what do you think of those images that the press was shown?
Last week, I was on the program Piers Morgan Uncensored. At that point, the so-called humanitarian distribution centers were just being set up. I was asked my opinion. I stated, quote, "It was perfectly obvious what was going to happen." Israel was setting up the humanitarian distribution centers in the south of Gaza. There was reportedly one going to be in the center of Gaza, none in the north of Gaza. As of this morning, all of the distribution centers are in the south of Gaza. Now, I said it was perfectly obvious what was going to happen. As you know, Gaza was already, before October 7th, amongst the most densely populated places on God's earth. Now, the entire population of Gaza was being herded into the south of Gaza, about 20 to 25% of Gaza. They were already being starved on the verge of famine, according to the international humanitarian organizations. And I said, what's going to happen? Israel's going to start firing on the people converging on the distribution centers, and they're going to claim that they were afraid, that the Gazans were rioting.
Mr. Amidror says that this line isn't correct, though. What do you make to the assertion that it's a lie, as Mr. Amidror said?
Yes. Well, we already have statements issued by the High Commissioner, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. We have a statement issued this morning by Doctors Without Borders, and they all confirm that the massacres were committed by Israelis. I'm not sure why anyone at this point in time, why anyone would attach any significance whatsoever to a statement by a spokesperson or representative or unofficial representative of the Israeli government. It's not as if it's true that Israel has barred reporters from entering Gaza since October 7th. But it's also true that the international humanitarian organizations, the World Food Program, CARE, UNICEF, a whole host, a slew, a gamut of humanitarian organizations do have operations in Gaza.
Is only his.
Go ahead, Yaakov.
And
okay.
allow me just the last sentence.
To quote the anti-Israeli organizations again and again, they told so many lies during the war about Israel, and afterwards it was clear that these are lies. Remember the missile which happened to be in one of the hospitals at the beginning of the war, and what was exactly the accusation? Israel. And then later on, it was clear that with all the stories of this organization, it was a clear lie. It was done by the Palestinians, on the Palestinians, but the story go on and on and on. And to quote from those organizations, which don't have any clue what's going on inside, and they are against Israel all the time. They never were pro-Israel organization or fair organization speaking about Israel. They collaborate inside Gaza with Hamas, as we know. Under UNRWA hospitality, Hamas took our hostages into UNRWA facilities. So to quote those United Nations organizations, it's like to quote the old Prime Minister of Israel, who is now the head of one of the heads of the opposition against the government of Israel. Of course, in these organizations have a very clear line. Whenever they can, they condemn Israel, and when they tell lies, they never said, yes, it was lying, we made a mistake. So to quote them is not bringing any new information to the debate. I mean, when we are making mistakes, we are saying it was a mistake, we did a mistake, and we know how to punish those who made a mistake. When we don't make mistake, but these are lies, we know to say that it is lies, and to say that the Israeli spokesmen are not telling the truth about the war, it's against the reality on the ground.
Yaakov, let me ask you this. Israel has systematically discredited and dismantled the humanitarian apparatus in Gaza. Mm-hmm. Is that a wartime strategy?
Which cooperated with Hamas. We had to do it because we found after a few days that if you want to find a very important center of Hamas, we have to go to find 3 points: an hospital, a mosque, and an UNRWA facility, under which in 90% of our researchers, we found a center of Hamas. The last commander of Hamas, the Mohammed Sinwar, was killed in a hospital. We bombed the Italian hospital because Mohammed Sinwar was there and he was killed. So the commander of Hamas is in hospital. So this hospital is a legitimate target. If we want to fight this organization, it's a legitimate target, and we want to fight this organization after what had been done in the 7th of October, the atrocities, the butcher of children, and so on and so forth. And despite the fact that he was in the hospital, we had to kill him in this hospital, and probably other people had been hurt.
Okay. I want to ask Norman, what do you think about this strategy of discrediting humanitarian organizations?
Which collaborated with Hamas.
We have a choice here. The choice is very simple. We can choose to believe this spokesperson for a genocidal government, or we can choose to believe every humanitarian organization in the world. That's the choice. There doesn't seem to be any dispute between us that every humanitarian organization in the world, UN affiliated and not affiliated to the UN, United Nations Development Program, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, CARE, UNICEF, International Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, the list goes on and on. There is a consensus among these organizations. That consensus extends to non-UN organizations. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories, B'Tselem. So we have UN-affiliated organizations, non-UN-affiliated organizations. There is a consensus. Israel is executing a genocide in Gaza. It is not correct Israel is waging a war in Gaza. It is not correct that Israel is using disproportionate force. What's correct is Israel is using proportionate force. The force is proportionate to achieving a genocide. It's not using disproportionate force because it's not fighting a war. It's waging a genocide. Now, I have to underline that is not my opinion.
Israel is losing,
It is not my opinion. It's the opinion of every humanitarian organization in the world.
Missiles and rockets from Gaza. It's not a war. Israelis have been butchered by this organization, which he defended now, Hamas. It's not a war. Israeli has been kidnapped by this organization to facilities of UNRWA and other United Nations organizations. And this is not a war. Not to call it a war, you can say that we are fighting not in the way that you want us to fight. But at the end of the day, it was imposed on Israel by Hamas, which was butchered, raped, kidnapped women, men, old people, babies, which had been killed inside Gaza. So to say it's not a war, you can say that you don't like the way that Israel is fighting the war. You never liked any war that Israel did in the past and in the present. We know it's okay. But to say that this is not a war, it's not a mistake. It's a joke. We lost today three soldiers. So it's not a war. It's nice Israel is doing genocide. And with all due respect, it's not genocide. We are fighting against a terror organization which butchered Israeli in the 7th of October. And we will not let this organization to survive in Gaza, inside United Nations facilities and outside United Nations facilities. This organization will not exist in the future. And yes, it's very bad. It's a war. We are losing people. The Palestinians are losing people. But at the end of the day, remember what, where, and how it was begun.
Okay, Norman, respond to what Yaakov has been saying.
Atrocity against civilians in Israel.
Okay, let's listen, let's examine what he's told us. Let's look at the numbers. Let's just start with the raw numbers. Israel has averaged, I'm leaving aside the events today, which I haven't seen the new calculations for. I'm aware that Israel claims 3 of its IDF soldiers were killed in northern Gaza. Let's leave that aside for the moment.
In Herzl Mountain in Jerusalem.
Allow me to, the moderator is going to have to allow me to finish.
Indeed, yeah. Continue, Norman.
Okay, so let's look at the numbers. Since October 7th, Israel has averaged less, based on its Israel Foreign Affairs website. It's averaged less than 1 soldier killed a day. Less than 1 Israeli soldier killed a day. In fact,
Thank God.
You're going to have to let me finish, sir.
Just continue, Norman. You're free to continue. Just and Major General, Yaakov, just allow Norman to finish his point.
They've averaged less than 1 soldier killed a day. There has not been not one major battle fought in Gaza since October 8th. Now you have to ask yourself, does that sound like a war? Let's look at some of the raw numbers. More journalists have been killed in Gaza than in any other war zone in the world combined for 2 years. More UN workers have been killed in Gaza than throughout the world in war zones in the last several years. More children. Do you want to know the figure on children? Let me just give you one example. There's a very reputable British research firm called Air Wars. It found that 7 times as many children were killed in Gaza just in the first 3 weeks from October 7th to October 31st. More children, 7 times as many children were killed in Gaza than during the worst month of the Syrian civil war. 7 times as many. There were more children killed in Gaza in the first 3 weeks of October than the worst year of the civil war in Syria.
Okay, I'm going to throw that over to Yaakov so we can keep the conversation going. Yaakov, what do you make of those statistics?
It's impossible. It's nonsense. Technically, it's impossible. It's nonsense. Do you know the number of people had been killed in Syria? Technically, it's impossible.
The number of children.
Yes, I'm speaking about number of children. Technically, it's impossible.
But maybe speak to the point that Norman is making, that there is a disproportionate number of children being targeted. What do you say to that point that he's making?
What I'm saying is that if Hamas, now we have to decide, should we fight against this terror organization or not? If we want to fight against this terror organization, we have to go after these terrorists in where they are. And if they decide to fight behind their own families, we don't have any other choice. We have to decide, should we fight this terror organization or not? If we want to fight this organization, and I think that we should fight this organization, we have to go and to kill them where they are, not where they don't hide. They hide behind their own families. So they have to be blamed. If they say to the family, leave the area, I want to fight against the IDF. Okay, no problem. No civilian will be killed. But if they decide to fight against the IDF within their own society, within their own people, within their own family, they're endangering their own people. And now they claim that we made a crime. But the decision was theirs. They decided to make the war on the 7th of October. They took our hostages into their families. Many of them lived with their families. And now people are coming and saying, how you fight against the terror organization? You're killing civilians, the families of those terrorists. There is no other way to fight them. The decision at the beginning, should we fight this terror organization or not? If you say no, it's okay, Norman is right. But if you say no, this terror organization should be eliminated as terror organization, there is no any other way but to fight where they are.
Okay, allow Norman to respond to that.
This gentleman speaks as if your audience is completely ignorant. Now, maybe it is, but I would suspect it's not. We have by now literally thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of documentation on what's been happening in Gaza since October 8th, 2023. To take one example that speaks to this gentleman, his claims, Amnesty International put out a 250-page report on the situation in Gaza. It concluded that Israel is carrying out genocide. That's old news. So now let me get to the specific. In the report, it examined 15 specific cases of targeting of buildings, dwellings, and killing large numbers of civilians. And it exhaustively examined the 15 cases. Now, I will admit, given what Israel has done, 15 cases is not many. Israel has destroyed 92% of the homes in Gaza. 92%. But they did examine close up 15 cases. What did they find? In each and every one of the 15 cases, they could not find evidence of any military target. There is no evidence that Hamas is being targeted. Now, we can argue or disagree on whether Hamas deserves to be targeted.
Yeah, so I want to ask you that.
Discussion about that.
Well, let me ask you that question. Let me ask.
There is no evidence whatsoever. There is no evidence whatsoever that Israel is targeting Hamas. Israel is targeting the civilian population of Gaza. It wants to solve, for once and for all, the Gaza question. This is the final solution to the Gaza question. Now, some of you may find it outrageous that I should use the language of final solution.
No,
but you know what one Israeli poll.
I know, you use it all the time.
You know what? You know what one Israel. Do you know what one Israeli poll found last week?
Use it against Israel.
An Israeli poll.
No, man, it's not you.
A poll conducted.
I don't have any.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question. Gentlemen, just hold it there for a moment. Norman, before we move on to our next segment, where I'm going to ask both of you. I have a question for you first, though, Norman.
I want to finish the thought.
Allow me ask.
I would like to finish the thought.
Okay, very promptly finish your thought because we've got a lot to cover.
A poll taken by a reputable Israeli firm last week found that nearly half of Israeli Jews support committing a genocide in Gaza. So when I talk about the final solution, I'm talking about what half of Israelis believe. You should kill everyone in Gaza.
Okay, I have to allow Yaakov to respond to that.
One remark, with all due respect to Amnesty. Amnesty is not an intelligence organization. If there was in the basement of the building an office or a storage of Hamas, they cannot know.
Yaakov, can you respond directly to what Norman was asking you first, though? Can you respond directly to that statement?
Yes. Which one?
To the poll that he was referring to, saying
I don't know the poll. I don't know who did it.
He does know the poll. He does know the poll. It was reported everywhere. It was in the. It was in. No, he knows the poll.
Okay, well, let me rephrase the question, Norman. Allow me to rephrase the question to Yaakov.
With all due respect, you don't tell me what I know and I don't.
So I'm going to rephrase the question.
You know what?
Regardless of what particular poll was, just a moment, Yaakov, let me rephrase the question. Regardless of what the poll...
I answer you. I don't know the poll. Let's assume that this is the poll. For the sake of argument, let's assume this is the poll. Israel is a democracy. Everyone can say whatever he wants. But at the end of the day, there is a government and there is a parliament, and the government never gave such an order. It's against the rules of engagement of the IDF. An officer who will do it will be taken into a court. He cannot do it. So even if people in the street can say whatever they want, it's like America or Britain, everyone can say whatever he wants. At the end of the day, the rules of engagement of the IDF are very clear, and everyone which will be found that he killed civilians in purpose to kill the civilians, not because Hamas is there, not because a commander is there, but in the purpose of killing civilians, will be taken into a court. We had such occasions during the war, and that's what was done.
So let me ask the question then. During all of these accusations, all the investigations, how many soldiers have been investigated for the accusations that have been made against them during this conflict?
I don't know because I didn't prepare myself for this question. I don't know because I didn't prepare myself for this question. I know that there were some investigations. Some of them had been taken to court. There are a lot of noise in Israel because you understand that many people are against it in Israel. So I know more from those who are against it than the real number. I don't know the number. Probably, I don't know how.
Okay,
but
all
it's
right.
not the end. We haven't.
Well,
actually, we have a minute. Norman, let me speak. It's not the end. We have an ongoing investigation in every claim that was such an issue during the IDF fighting inside Gaza, and the same is about Lebanon and the West Bank. So the number that we have today, it's not the last number. Probably the system in Israel is that the independent legal system is continuing to investigate during the war. And I don't know what will be the number at the end.
Norman?
Well, actually, we do know what the number will be at the end, because there's a long history of those so-called investigations. In fact, the investigations are such a sham that B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization for the occupied territories, refuses at this point to even cooperate with these investigations because they're such a joke. If you take, for example, Operation Cast Lead, which Prime Minister Olmert presided over, there were 350 children killed, there were 6,000 homes killed, and there were investigations. And you know what the investigations came to? One person served 6 months jail time for stealing a credit card. That's the Israeli investigations. I can go through each of these so-called operations. The Mavi Marmara in 2010, Operation Protective Edge. We can go through all the investigations of the killings in the West Bank. There are many humanitarian organizations which have monitored not just the killings, but monitored the so-called investigations. The conclusion of all of them, conclusion of all of them.
Because
now,
in the Mavi Marmara, I was part of the Israeli side. And at the end of the day, it was a judge from New Zealand who said that what we did was the right action to do. So at the end of the day, with all the Mavi Marmara, a United Nations investigation done by a judge from New Zealand said that what was done by the Israeli Navy was supposed to be done according to the international law. So just one example that you gave, nothing about
Okay, I'm going to ask both of you to pause because I have one last question to Norman and then we need to move on. Yaakov, just a moment, please.
Was investigated by a totally different outside investigator.
Okay, Norman, I have one question for you before we need to move on.
Then you know that you are lying.
Okay, just a moment, please, Yaakov.
There was an accusation made, and I want to reply to the accusation.
Okay, gentlemen, but I'm going to have to get you to continue moving this conversation on. Norman, respond, and then we're moving on. Go ahead.
Mr. Amidor's misfortune, I've studied the Mavi Marmara case very closely. There was a UN Human Rights Commission which found Israel guilty of all the crimes that were asserted against it.
Yeah.
Then the Secretary General appointed a separate unofficial commission to investigate. And yes, it's true. The unofficial commission investigated by the Secretary General found otherwise. But the official opinion of the UN investigation was that Israel committed all the crimes that it was accused of.
Okay, with all due respect, we're not going to get bogged down in previous cases and previous investigations. Yaakov, I'm going to move us on because those previous investigations are no longer relevant. So Norman, let me ask this point to you because it's a point that Yaakov has made and I want you to respond to it before we move on to our next segment, is that Israel is a country with a reputation and a responsibility to defend its national security interests at all costs. So do you think that seeing as we have seen this drawn out now for 21 months, was there a major miscalculation on Hamas's front, because it too is accused of alleged war crimes for what it committed on October 7. Was this whole thing a huge mistake and they have not yet claimed responsibility for it?
It's hard in a very brief moment to discuss the whole situation. I'll try to be as succinct as possible.
Thank you.
If you go back and look at the historical record, beginning in 1948, when Gaza came under Egyptian rule, beginning with Egyptian rule, you see over and over again outside observers characterizing the situation in Gaza as being a concentration camp. Right after the June 1967 war, Senator Albert Gore visited Gaza, described it as a concentration camp. Now, Mr. Amidror is part of the security establishment in Israel, or was. So surely he knows. So he won't be able to say, I don't know. Like you never heard of the poll that everybody's been citing. But surely you know, Mr. Amidror, that Giora Island, who's still among us.
If you can bring it back to the question I asked you, Norman, do you think
yes,
this was a miscalculation?
I'm bringing it back.
Let's hear it.
I'm bringing it back. In 2004, Giora Island described Gaza as, quote, a huge concentration camp. Not Hamas, not the UN organizations, but your boss. Giora Island described Gaza as a huge concentration camp. Beginning in 2006, your country imposed a medieval siege on Gaza. It decided what goes in, what goes out, who goes in, who goes out. It imposed on Gaza a starvation plus diet. And then it started with its high-tech killing sprees. Operation Cast Lead, Operation Protective Edge, Operation Pillar of Defense, and on, murdering mercilessly the people of Gaza. By 2023, Gaza was forgotten. Gaza was no longer part of the political landscape. Now, I am not going to condemn the people of Gaza or Hamas. I acknowledge crimes of a significant magnitude occurred on October 7th. I acknowledge that. There's no dispute on that point. But I will no more condemn Hamas than I will condemn the slaves who rose up in rebellion and killed promiscuously white people. If you go back and look at the slave rebellions in North America, in the Caribbean, they were very bloody. But
okay.
I wouldn't condemn
Norman, I'm going to have to give Yaakov the right to reply.
My final response is, after what Israel did to the people of Gaza, it forfeited its right to self-defense.
Okay, Yaakov?
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not going to argue about the war in the rebellion of the slaves and what is the connection between that and Gaza, with all due respect. But I don't understand how the number of Palestinians in Gaza became from 1 million to 2 million in 15 years, if all this starvation and all what Israel did to kill the Palestinians, something is not logic here. If we had the mission to kill as many Palestinians as possible, to put starvation on Gaza and not let the people to eat and so on and so forth, how the number grew from 1 million 15 years ago to 2 million after 15 years. It's something not logic in the whole conversation with Norman claims. But I'm not going to
Was Giora Island lying?
Okay.
Was Giora Island lying?
I know that both of you were listening in.
Island lying?
In concentration, Norman, you should know at least some history in concentration
Was
camp.
Giora Island?
Okay,
When Giora
that's
Island
not the topic.
arrived-
Norman, thank you, but that's not the topic we're discussing here. I want to move our conversation on, Yaakov.
He asked a question I want to answer. In concentration camp, as you know, I hope that you know some history, people died every day, and the number of the people in the concentration camp was declined and not increased. And in Gaza, what we see is a miracle. It's a concentration camp in which the number of people had been increased. So if this is a concentration camp, it's your decision to decide.
Okay, we need to move on. Gentlemen, I know you were both listening in to our earlier interview with the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, and I know that you both want to express your views on some of the things he said, and we'd like to hear your opinions on it. So, Norman, what did you make of Mr. Olmert's comments? He said war crimes have been committed, but he said this is not a genocide. What did you make of what he said?
Once again, we have to distinguish between my own opinion, which I have, and the opinions of all organizations that have investigated the question. Now, as you're aware, in January 2024, the International Court of Justice concluded that Israel was plausibly committing genocide in Gaza. Amnesty International, as I mentioned earlier, put out a 250-page report, concluded Israel was committing genocide in Gaza. Human Rights Watch put out an extensive report. It found that Israel was committing acts of genocide in Gaza. There were many Israeli scholars, who weighed in on the question and said that Israel was committing genocide in Gaza. So I do not believe that this is any longer a controversial question among reputable scholars and reputable humanitarian organizations. Mm-hmm. Now the question has arisen. Okay, I'll stop there and I'll then proceed after you speak to the other guests.
Yeah, sure. Yaakov, what did you make of what you heard from Olmert, the idea that there is a deliberate targeting of civilians, he said? It might not be a prescribed order, but he said that it's not a prescribed order, but he said that there are civilian casualties and that the war needs to stop.
As I said, there are many civilian casualties, no question about it. The question is why. And the fact that Hamas is fighting within the civilians is leading to the situation in which the IDF, if we want to fight this organization, if Norman thinks that we should not fight this organization, it's okay. I know that Norman is pro-Hamas guy. I know that he is promoting Hamas and not even ready to condemn what Hamas did in the 7th of October. So from his point of view, we don't have the right and legitimacy to fight Hamas. That is well understood. We think that we have the legitimacy and the obligation to fight Hamas after the 7th of October. And there is no any way, and no one offered us a way, not Americans, not Brits, not French, that we are bringing here experts, including American generals, who are saying we don't know any other way to fight terrorists within civilians other than what you are doing. So, of course, the decision is at the beginning. Should we fight this organization or not?
Was it disappointing to hear a former Prime Minister say those things, Yaakov?
Look, I don't want to speak about Mr. Olmert. He has to be resigned with disgrace after a legal proceeding against him. I don't want to blame him. I mean, it's part of the democracy of Israel. He was a prime minister. As I said, he resigned with disgrace. But this is, he can speak. It's Israel's democracy. And he hates the prime minister. He hated him before the war. He hates him after the war. It's not connected to the war at all. It's a fight within leaders inside Israel. He's an ex-leader which lost all his position. He does not represent anyone. And he's hating the prime minister. By the way, before the war, it's not connected to the war. So I don't want to go into the Israeli fight between leaders. I'm not a politician. I'm an expert. I don't want to be in the politics at all.
Okay.
But what I know for sure, and I have a huge experience in looking at wars, that Israel is doing whatever it can do to prevent Palestinians from being killed. Norman said that we moved the population from North Gaza to the south. Why we did it? Because we didn't want civilians to be in the battlefield.
Okay,
And at the end,
we're focusing purely on what the former Prime Minister said in his interview, though. So, Norman, let me ask you.
No one is using it against us, but what we did is to move the civilians. By the way, we moved the Israeli civilians as well.
Okay.
We evacuated all the Israeli civilians and we moved the Palestinian civilians. Why? We didn't want them to be in the battlefield.
Yeah.
And
Norman, were you surprised by the strength of Mr. Olmert's comments? Or were they not strong enough in your mind?
Not strong enough.
Mr. Olmert made many comments. Yes, Mr. Olmert made many comments, some of which I guess are plausible, other of which I would say are implausible. I don't think it's plausible to make the argument at this point in time that Israel is targeting Hamas, or there's no conscious, intentional targeting of civilian infrastructure and civilian population. I mean, it's almost silly at this point to be arguing these things. Already in November 2023, we're talking about 18 months ago, Amnesty International issued a report saying Israel was using starvation as a weapon of war. Human Rights Watch issued a large report, about 150 pages, documenting that Israel was depriving the population of Gaza was systematically depriving the population of Gaza of water. Foreign doctors working in Gaza hospital testified that Israel was targeting children in the head, in the skull, and in the chest. After this accumulation of evidence across the board, to still be claiming, as Mr. Olmert did, that Israel is not targeting civilians, there are no orders, allow me to answer that question. Number one, there were orders. Have we forgotten the order of Defense Minister Gallant on October 9th? Not to allow any food, water, fuel, or electricity into Gaza? Okay. Isn't that a genocidal order? When Mr. Netanyahu said,
it is not a genocide. No, you ask a question.
When Mr.
Not a genocide. It's Norman.
When Mr. Netanyahu said, when Mr. Netanyahu said, remember Amalek, wasn't that a genocidal reference?
No, it's not.
When President Herzog said there are no civilians in Gaza, that there's no distinction between civilians and Hamas, wasn't that a genocidal statement?
You are wrong.
Do you realize?
You are misquoting.
I'm not misquoting.
No,
I'm not misquoting. Mr. Herzog.
Okay, Norman, allow Yaakov the right of reply.
I'm misquoting what was said, that is impossible to distinguish between civilians and Hamas. It is the same family. There are people which are going with civilian clothes, and to distinguish between Hamas and civilians, it's almost impossible. He's going out of his house, he's killing some Israelis, and then he's going back home. So the home is a civilian place or a military place. That was said by the president.
He said there are no civilians, there are no innocents in Gaza.
Okay.
That's what he said. Please don't rewrite the history. It's not yet dry on the paper, and you're already trying to rewrite it.
Okay, all right. I want to move us on to our final section because we're really fastly running out of time. So let me just quickly ask, okay, for months and months now, this conflict has been dragging on. We've seen Israel's traditional allies stand by them through thick and thin, but that's starting to change. France has threatened to toughen its stance. due to Israel's treatment of civilians. And France, the UK and Canada are also talking about the possibility of sanctions. So are we seeing, Yaakov, a turning point for Israel's allies?
I don't know, probably, but at the end of the day, the responsibility for the security of the State of Israel is not in the hands of the President of France or the Prime Minister of Britain or the President of Canada. It's the hands of the government of Israel. And in democracy like Israel, if they have the majority in the parliament after a few elections, unlike all our neighbors, the decision will be taken by the Israeli government. They will take into account all the what they heard from the international community, of course. By the way, some of what we did in the past was because of the international community. For example, we waited 3 months and didn't enter to Rafah because of the international community. The recommendation of the international community was not to do anything in Lebanon, and we could be in a situation in which today Hezbollah was close to the border of Israel, unlike the situation of today when Hezbollah is far to the north. So we take into account what they say, but at the end of the day, the decision will be done by the Israeli government.
Norman, what do you think? Are you sensing a change in the response from the international community? Are you seeing a change in the rhetoric?
I see rats jumping off a sinking ship. What's happened in Gaza, not especially, but for the international media and for world leaders, the brutal starvation imposed on Gaza since early March until today, and all the embarrassing scenes that ensued, all the very realistic fears that Gaza was experiencing a starvation now bordering on famine, it's become such an embarrassment that some of the rats, like the British Foreign Secretary Lamy and the Nazi princess Ursula von der Leyen of the European Commission, after supporting all of Israel's actions, are now trying to distance themselves. Whether or not that will translate into action, I can't say. I see no point in speculating about. I think the most important thing at this point is to establish clearly what happened and what is happening. And it should be borne in mind by every one of your listeners, because Israel has a citizen army. The army is representative of the Israeli population. Half of that population supports genocide. That means 1 of every 2 Israeli soldiers in Gaza supports genocide. 1 of every 2 commanders in Gaza supports genocide. 1 of every 2 members of the Israeli government supports genocide. In the face of that fact, in the face of that fact on the one side, and there has been no punishment of any of those soldiers and commanders committing genocide on the other hand, between those 2 facts, how can any sane, rational person doubt that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, order from above or not?
We have to leave it there. We're out of time. Yaakov, a very, very brief response from you, and then we have to leave it there.
Look, no one is blaming Israel for genocide for years. It doesn't need the Gaza war for that. And as I said, after all these years, the number of Palestinians in Gaza was more than doubled. So it's a very interesting kind of a genocide in the West Bank and in Gaza, when we are making genocide and we are so inefficient in what we are doing. It's inefficiency of Israel.
Norman, we don't have time. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for your time on Counterpoints. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, Yaakov, we're out of time. Yaakov, we have to leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for your time here on Counterpoints. It's been a robust discussion. Your contribution is valuable to us. Thank you. Yaakov Amidror, the former Israeli National Security Advisor, and Norman Finkelstein, American political scientist and author. And thanks to you for joining us watching Counterpoints at home. Remember to subscribe to Al Arabiya English on YouTube so you don't miss any of our debates. And follow us on X and TikTok. Thanks for your time.